Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Deputy Director, California DMV, Bernard Soriano.
Hey, Charlie. How you doing?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. How's everyone doing? All right. We got a star-packed panel in front of you. So I'm going to introduce, we got 4 people that will be coming up here. Randy, why don't you come on up? Randy Iwasaki, who's the Executive Director of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. He needs a round of applause here. And then, let's see, David Zuby from the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety. And John Buszek from AutonomouStuff. And Yaoming Shen from Baidu. Come on up. Have a seat, gentlemen. So we got, this panel is about in AVs we trust, getting there through careful testing and implementation. So we've got a number of different things that we're going to be asking the panels, ask them to comment, and then we'll have you all will have a chance to ask them some questions. But wanted to address the disengagement reports, because I understand this morning we had a lively discussion about whether or not those disengagement reports that we require at the California DMV are of value, and I know that some people are saying that those disengagement reports aren't the measure that should be used, and to an extent that's true. It shouldn't be the end all to be all, but it is a measure of at least some modicum of to get a window of how these vehicles are operating on our roadways, and that's what we have. We wanted to get more data, and that's something that we want to explore in the future. But so more to come on that. So on our panel, I wanted to talk first with Randy Iwasaki, because Randy is the Executive Director of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, and he and I have worked together on autonomous vehicles in the past. In fact, Randy, we worked together to get you the first 2 licenses of a shared autonomous vehicle to be used in Gomentum Station. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that process and what you've learned and how that has been going?
Actually, it was the first 2 licenses to operate on public streets in California.
That's right.
But we looked at San Ramon. And so I'm going to tell you a funny story real quickly about Bernard. So we called Gomentum Station the largest secure autonomous vehicle test bed in the United States. We called it Project 51, and people were asking, what's this Project 51? I said, it's top secret. I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. And so we're talking about Project 51, and finally we announced we're opening this test bed. And the first person in state service to call me was Bernard. And Bernard says, hey, Randy, do you have a permit to allow all those vehicles to be tested out at Gomentum Station? I said, that's what's wrong with the state nowadays. You should be calling me, how can we help you? If I was still at the state, I would have called Bernard and said, hey, Bernard, how can I help you? And I said, by the way, those disengagement reports, we don't have to do those. In fact, we're going to disengage 27 times, and we're going to tell you, but we're not writing one report, because in those days, we've gained more synergy. I said, what value does disengagement have to do with anything? So Bernard and I have worked together for probably 20 years, because I worked for the state. And I think that's really important in this industry, is that part of giving us the first 2 licenses to operate a level 4 vehicle on public streets, we know in California that the pendulum swings dramatically from yes, you can test to no, you can't. So if we mess up, we're going to blow it for everybody. So we developed a secure proving grounds. We started testing there. And sometimes what happens with technology is, in my business, we try to underpromise and overdeliver. And in the technology industry, sometimes there's much hype, over-delivery, and under-promising. And so you have to make sure that the vehicles, when they say they can make a left-hand turn across traffic, they can make a left-hand turn across traffic at any speed. So when you get speed differential, you get some issues. And so we started testing out at Gomentum Station and ran those vehicles through their paces. They used to look at weeds, so weeds grow up out of the pavement at Gomentum Station, and it would fool the sensors because they didn't see it yesterday on those precision-based maps. And so we ran those vehicles through a countless number of iterations. It was like watching paint dry. We'd bring a bunch of people out, elected officials, like, oh my God, we're in a level 4 vehicle, and they get in, they say, what's happening? I said, it's going very slowly. But the good news is not making any mistakes. And so I think that was the value of the test bed. I think then we brought Bernard and the director at the time, Gene Shimamoto, and we took them all around the test bed trying to get the state to invest in Momentum Station. And we got to this roundabout area in the administration area, which looks much like a mini city. Her tire was leaking, and I was blamed for popping her tire until we got our license, and that wasn't true.
I still think you wanted us as a captive audience.
Well, I did, but I didn't want to pop your tire because you didn't have a spare, if you remember right. But I think the point is we've worked very well together. I think you need a test facility to make sure that those vehicles do what they say they're going to do, and then ultimately operate them on public streets. And so you can run countless number of simulations. You can test it in a more realistic environment and then roll it out on public streets. I think that was a prudent effort. And I want to thank the California DMV for placing the faith in us to give us the first 2 licenses for those vehicles on public streets.
Yeah. So you're welcome. But speaking of public streets, what do you think are the challenges that you see in testing autonomous vehicles, at least the driving features on public streets?
I think part of it is the randomness of the actions of the various drivers. I heard somebody say the other day is, why doesn't everybody obey all the laws? Well, that'd be great if everybody obeyed all the laws, but what happens is they don't. And so as you get into this, you have a multitude of scenario edge cases that you have to run through. And so if you want to make a left-hand turn on a differential intersection where you got 45 mile an hour speed, 25 mile an hour speed, you can run the vehicles over and over through your neighborhood, but I'm pretty sure people would start protesting. So you can simulate some of that with high definition mapping and then go ahead and test it out at a test facility like Momentum Station.
Yeah, that randomness sure is something that is hard to replicate.
Right.
So let's shift a little bit to from a local government agency to an independent entity like the Insurance Institute. So David, you recently, your organization recently rated 2 electric vehicles as being the safest vehicles, right? The Tesla Model 3, as well as the Audi. Can you talk more about that process and what you found and how the testing came about?
Sure. So to be clear, we didn't name the Audi e-tron and the Model 3 the safest vehicles ever. But we did award them an IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus for 2019. And Top Safety Pick Plus is something that we've been doing since 2006 to try to help consumers understand which of the vehicles that they can go buy today are offering the highest levels of safety. Now, currently our evaluation doesn't include things like autonomous driving systems and is largely based on whether or not cars will protect you in a crash if it occurs. And in that respect, Model 3 and the e-tron join a group of almost another 50 vehicles that meet our criteria. But I think from our perspective, it's important that there be somebody engaged in this process. There needs to be governments to make sure to set the guidelines everybody has to follow. And then there needs to be somebody who doesn't have a vested interest in trying to sell a system or sell a product, who can stand back and say, okay, these are the safer ones, or these are the not safe ones, and these are the ones that have a lot more work to do in order to help build the public trust that's necessary to get automated driving on the road.
Yeah, fascinating. And was that the first time electric vehicles were in that same category?
So we had tested electric vehicles before. I believe those are the first 2 electric vehicles to earn a Top Safety Pick Plus award.
Right, great. I'll ask you the same question that I asked Randy. What do you see are some of the challenges with testing autonomous driving features on public roadways?
Well, first off, I think testing on the roadways is going to be absolutely critical because the only way you ultimately know if the system really works is by putting it in the real world. But I think one of the challenges, especially if you're testing something that's under development, it's not baked yet. You have to make sure that you've got processes built into the testing process to make sure it's safe, that you're not putting other people in danger, because in the real world, on the streets, there are a lot of unwitting participants. So, some of the things that Chris Urmson was talking about in the keynote address, I think are very critical to making sure that the testing is being done in a safe way. But the other challenge about the real world is it doesn't repeat itself all that very often.
Same thing Randy was talking about.
And so if you want to know whether or not System A is better than System B, or our version 1 is safer than our version 2 is safer than our version 2, That's hard, that's hard, if not impossible to do on the real road because you don't have control over all of the variables that you need to keep track of. That's why ultimately to be able to validate that these systems are working safely, it's going to require a combination of testing in an isolated environment, testing in the simulation, and also on-road testing, and somehow figure out a way to bring these different pieces of information together to come up with an idea of whether or not the system is safe.
Okay, great. Got a question on that, but we'll save that for the end because you know that threshold of when is it safe to move on is something everyone is interested in. So let's move on to autonomous stuff. John, you mentioned functional safety. You know, is a huge challenge for autonomous designers, but operational safety for the people that are in the vehicle is also a challenge. How has autonomous stuff matured in the level of operational safety?
I think that's been one of the most important pieces of maturation in the company is how do we operate experimental autonomous vehicles safety, right? Because when you dig in the details, it's not a straightforward question, but it's so important. And we've seen in the media what can happen if the operational safety processes you're following with a research level autonomous vehicle aren't adequate, right? And so, you know, I think the first thing we need to do is just look at what are the three core, or I would say pillars, that our operational safety practices are built on. The first would be, how much testing have you done before you take that vehicle into live traffic? That would be simulation-based testing, and then of course, closed course test tracks. I mean, right now, the core live traffic software development team at AutonomouStuff actually works full-time at a closed course test track, because I can't think of any better place for them to be. The next would be, what is your checklist, right? Before you press that button that turns on autonomous driving mode, what is your checklist that you follow to make sure that you've done everything you need to make sure that vehicle is going to be safe for road users? And I can tell you, if you don't have a strong process, that checklist is not going to be very useful. Yeah. And the last thing would be the training of the operators, right? You know, how do they know when they should take over, right? And when they take over, how do they take over, right? Can it be a vehicle dynamics situation? Yes. So making sure that our drivers know when to take over, how to take over, and what are the roles and responsibilities. Today, when we're driving or testing live traffic autonomous driving in a city, we're to the point where we have 3 engineers always involved. You have the safety driver in the driver's seat who's just looking at the road, deciding if what the autonomous driving system's doing is safe and then can take over if he touches the steering wheel, brake, or throttle. You have an engineer in the passenger seat who's looking at his laptop, checking out diagnostics of the system, trying to decide, hey, something's not right. I should tell the safety driver to take over, or maybe press a button that will automatically return control back to the stopped vehicle. And then the third would be what we call a chase vehicle, someone outside of the vehicle who's following the autonomous vehicle with flashers on. And the reason for that is a lot of times these experimental vehicles, they can brake rather abruptly, right? And that could be false positive perception detection, or maybe your motion control is not good enough yet, things like that. And
those have ramifications because of that braking that's unexpected, right? We're seeing that in the crash reports that we get at the DMV. And invariably, it's always because a conventionally driven vehicle hits the autonomous vehicle from behind for one reason or another. Most likely, the vehicle stopped unexpectedly. That also gets to, when you were describing your process, gets to the need or the big requirement to have a private test track available to the different companies, whether they have one at their own disposal or they use one that is provided to them. Mm-hmm. What about functional safety in the early development stages? Because that is a challenge in itself. And how do you all handle that?
Well, I think, you know, we're taking baby steps. I think a big part of our functional safety is the large amounts of operational safety that we insert into the design. I mentioned those 3 pillars. I think, you know, another thing that enables us to achieve some level of functional safety is actually just the culture in our company. We want to have that culture of continuous improvement. When it comes to engineering design for safety, we never want our engineers to feel like they're done, right? There's no such thing as being done with safety. You need to know what state of the art is, and if you think you're there, great. Let's change what state of the art is. You know, come to conferences like this, work with regulators, and really work with the whole autonomous driving community to make things safer. And then we can gradually make things more functionally safe and start removing how much the operator is responsible for functional safety and have the technology take on more of that. When it comes to having the technology handle more of the safety, we're focused on the automotive safety standard, ISO 26262. And I'll tell you, there's a lot you need to do to be in compliance with that standard. And I would be talking for hours if I went through all the things. Just to name a few things off the top of my head, I think one that we put a lot of focus into is your software development process. You need to follow a very strict or stringent software development process to make sure that your software is at a very high quality level and that you're not missing anything in the software design that could cause something unsafe. And then the other thing I think we focus on is what needs to be added to the system specifically for safety. And one technology area that I think is brought into an autonomous vehicle for safety would be redundancy. And if you talk to someone, they think, oh, redundancy just means instead of one, you have two and you're done, right? But it turns out these incredibly high performance computers and sensors, if you want them to work or run perfectly in lockstep, they don't naturally like to do that. So there's lots of engineering that we have to come up with and execute in order to make sure that the redundant system's doing the job.
Yeah, great. Well, let's move from a overall system testing to more of a component testing. So, Yaoming, you're a senior optical engineer with Baidu, and as such, you deal a lot with the different components that are on the vehicle. Can you give us some background on how you test the various autonomous vehicle sensors?
Sure. There's no doubt the sensor testing are very important. We test the sensor on the optical design domain. It's called ODD, along with a significant amount of fault injection cases. Originally, we test at the very beginning. We test the sensors in the lab, and then we go to the closed loop installed on the vehicle. Then go to the open road, finally, to complete the test. So when testing individual sensors, we normally test it according to ISO 16675 list, the items listed there. For example, like shock test, like EMI, EMC, and also waterproof, because the sensors are installed outside of the vehicle. And also we test the like vibration test and some other critical tests as well. Besides that, so also do performance tests. Performance tests usually were done under different weather conditions, like snowing, like raining, fogging, etc. Some sensors, for example, like Lidar, we also test some corner cases, like when a large truck nearby, and also when it's close to a road sign, also like when facing sun. This scenario sometimes produce false points. It will generate a false object. So we want to make sure a sensor works normally under all these scenarios.
Oh, great. You mentioned the standards. What, besides those standards, or in addition to the standards, what measures do you all use to ensure the optics and the sensors are adequate to be used on autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, sure. From safety standard like ISO 26262 perspective, sensor has most sensor has some specifications. So we want to make sure these specifications are met when we do the design, also when we do the testing. For example, for the for the performance test, we usually get the specs from our perception team or PNC team. For example, for LiDAR, we usually need to cover a large distance. And also for camera, we need the dynamic range need to large enough, and also sensitivity need to be small enough to detect in wide scenario. So basically, we test against some reference or some golden unit to make sure those specifications are met. Sometimes sensors accept those electrical failures. Sometimes it's maybe sensor has some interference interactions. We also do some sortie verification to make sure those sensor works.
Great. Let's see. Let's open it up for questions from the audience. Charlie, you have the microphone there.
Got one of them. There's one on
got
either
somebody
side.
over there
so
that has a
right there.
question.
He's coming to you.
Hi there. I actually had a question for David specifically, but also anything you could say from the Transportation Authority, Randy. How close are you to gathering metrics, more specific metrics for, not you specifically, but the gathering of metrics for creating standards for autonomy, considering how fast it's progressing along?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, you know, the ultimate metric will be, do AVs crash less often and less severely than human-driven vehicles? But I understand, you know, that to get that measure, you've got to actually have vehicles on the road. So we need sort of pre-metrics to decide whether or not the vehicles can go onto the road. And, you know, there is going to be no perfect metric, right? And so I think the gentleman from Ford this morning mentioned maybe the starting place is, does it follow all the rules? If it doesn't follow all the rules, then it's failing to do the first thing. Another thing that I think we have to think more about, and unfortunately there isn't good data on what mistakes human beings are making that lead to crashes. We know that people drive impaired, but impairment isn't a cause for an accident. It's a contributing factor, right? So we need to think about what are the decisions that our humans are making that either increase the risk of the future situations or decrease the risk of the future situations in a way that we can say, okay, which of the systems is doing the best job of decreasing the risk of a bad incident occurring in the next, whatever it is, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds. Because a lot of mistakes that humans make is they assume everybody's going to do what they think they're going to do, and often they don't. So we speed rather than slow down when there are a lot of other road users, for instance. Or we blast through the yellow light because we're running late. All of these kinds of things ultimately lead to mistakes that more often than not work out, but when they don't work out, they result in crashes. So we need to start being able to measure, and I don't have the answer for you today, how do we tell that the automated driving system is making the right decisions?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, when is safe enough? And as you alluded to, a lot of it is, you know, if the autonomous vehicle is in less crashes than humans, but then that means the autonomous vehicle, that means society needs to accept the fact that autonomous vehicles are going to be crashing, and we as society tend to be more forgiving to humans than we are to machines. Randy?
Let me give a quick shout out to AAA. I think Ignacio's in the back there. They're working on some criteria for determining whether or not they're safe or not. So AAA has now subsumed and taken over Momentum Station, and we appreciate them as a great, fantastic partner. But let me get back to your question, maybe a different way. So we recently were allocated $7.5 million through the Automated Driving System Grant Program, and part of our program, there was three pilot projects, but we agreed with US DOT to try to get better metrics for safety. So right now we measure, so I used to work for Caltrans, we measure safety based on fatality injuries and fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, which means nothing to most people. So let's gather data where you have the ABS going off at location 1 over and over again. Let's go out and fix it on a proactive basis rather than a reactive basis, because that's how it works now. So if we're going to ever get that fatality rate down to 0, we're going to have to be more proactive than reactive. And I believe with all the sensors in the vehicles in the future, we can move from a reactive program to a proactive program and try to save some people's lives. And at the end of the day, when I work for the public sector, that's my top priority, and that's what we're trying to do all the time. So it's a different way to answer your metric question, but there is data in the future that will help the DOTs, the owner-operators, make their systems safer.
A question in the back there.
Who's got one? Okay.
Hey, John, I liked your checklist idea. Oh, I guess I should stand up. Sorry, very casual. From a perspective of the state laws, are any companies looking at incorporating that from the very get-go so that you are as legal as you can be?
Oh, definitely. I think, even if you say, hey, we can bring our research vehicles and have autonomous driving licenses in every state in the United States, I would say big deal. We need to keep going beyond that. And that checklist is huge. There's so many things you can do in terms of, what software is in this car right now? Has any engineer touched this car since the last time it drove in a live traffic situation? Safety mechanisms. Technology in the car that's there if there's a failure. If there hasn't been a failure for a long time, maybe it's been a while since you've used that technology. How do you know it still works? An operator, operational safety, can check it, make sure that all the safety mechanisms work before that vehicle goes out. All these things, and I think we're finding that as we work with more and more customers that use our vehicles, we're having a really positive impact because more and more companies are starting to take what we've learned through trial and error from other industries, and now the whole industry is sort of growing together.
Bernard, and I could spend a lot of time obviously talking to you, but along those lines, California DMV, obviously you meet with your brethren from other states. Where are we compared to other states in the country as far as adapting?
Well, and again, the session is about them, not about me. But just to quickly answer your question, across the country, well, California is the chair of a national working group that is funded through NHTSA to minimize the risk of having this patchwork of regulations. Across the country, you've got states that are chomping at the bit to have autonomous vehicles in their states, but they struggle with whether to be regulation heavy or regulation light, and how to do that, either through legislation or executive order or none, and just be very accepting of the fact that companies are able to come in and go on the public roadways. So it's across the board.
Okay. We have a question in the back.
Yeah, hi. This is directed, I think, mostly to Bernard, but anybody can answer. So I'm curious, a lot of people have talked today about meeting the laws, so meeting the CVC, right? We have some CVC items that are very obvious. We have other ones like 22350, the basic speed law, which say you should not drive for a variety of conditions beyond what is reasonable and prudent. So in terms of the DMV's perspective, besides collision outcomes or things like disengagements, how do you know something is good enough to meet the CVC when the CVC is so vague and ambiguous as to what is good enough?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We we very much buy into the self-certification model that we have in the United States, and so to that end, it's on the manufacturers. The manufacturers need to certify to us that they design products that will meet the rules of the road. And so, that's how it is now. Manufacturers need to self-certify that they meet all of the federal motor vehicle safety standards at the time of sale. And so we're proceeding along no differently in this regard.
I think where you run into trouble is when you need a waiver from FMVSS. And that was our plight, bringing in a too heavy vehicle to use on public streets. And so how we solved that problem is we passed the first piece of legislation, I think it's the only piece of legislation in California that exempted us from a steering wheel or brake pedal and an operator. And so that where you mentioned operator, I don't know how many times in the CVC, and brake pedal and all that, we just got rid of that. We're allowed to test.
Okay, we have a question right here.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the answers are in the data, and of course these companies are not going to, in a competitive environment, they're not going to want to share their data. But you could ask for like the top 50 incidences from each of them, and then study that.
But I think that's an important point. I mean, a lot of the answers are in the data, and you can complain about the disengagement reports that you're required to file with the California DMV, but it's one of the only instances of the companies who are in competition with each other being forced to share information about what they're doing with the public, and third parties who don't have an interest in trying to sell these systems to make some evaluation. So in the interest of transparency and making sure that the public can have some confidence, it's absolutely important that information be shared, even if it doesn't doesn't put the best light on your technology, because people need to understand what's going on and what's being done to address the shortcomings of the existing technology today.
Well said, David. I didn't pay him to say that. By the way.
That's good, yeah.
Do we have a question back there? Yes, please, go.
Thank you. This question is for David regarding the IIHS. I think you guys do a great job with your top safety pick in terms of bringing the industry along to put in this ADAS features. But from my knowledge, basically, ADAS, the NCAP, Euro NCAP is what is setting the standards for ADAS. And then we are basically following them along on that side. And if you look at the Euro NCAP testing standards, the testing for automatic emergency braking for a cyclist is done only at daytime. And if you look for the testing for automatic braking of a pedestrian or a car, is done with a lot of lighting conditions. There had to be street lights enough for them to work. And I think that's kind of biased towards the camera and radar technologies because it is readily available. So it's fine, it's a good starting step. But I would like your IIHS to think about going one step on that, saying, okay, you get 2 stars if you do it with the lights, but if you can do it without the lights, which is more realistic, you get more stars, which is actually promoting the LiDAR technology that is kind of stuck because we can make low-cost LiDARs if the volume comes behind, but that's driven by the industry in terms of coming up with the standards for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point, and you know, Euro NCAP we communicate with frequently, and ourselves, and to some extent, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration are aware that some of the technologies that we're trying to promote today don't address all of the problems, and that to do a better job, for instance, at avoiding crashes with pedestrians and cyclists, you gotta deal with nighttime. Half of the fatalities in pedestrians involve crashes that occur after the sun has set. So, but our tool, you know, is consumer information, which means I can tell you today that System A is better than System B, and if you're in the market for a new car, go buy a car that's got System A. It's no use to you as a consumer for me to say, go buy System C, which nobody's offering. So unfortunately, to use consumer information as a way to motivate the industry to provide higher levels of function and higher levels of safety, someone's got to start there so that, you know, there's an example for the consumer information testing programs to point to saying, these guys are doing it, and you know, everybody else needs to pick this up as well.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. That's all the time we have left for questions. I'm sure these gentlemen will be around afterwards to address questions that you all may have, so please feel free to reach out to them. Let's give it up for our panel.
Thank you very much. Bernard.
Thank you.
And panel, thank you.